What's up, everybody? Welcome to You Rankin with me. I am your host, Chad Webb. I am joined by my co-host, James Tancock, and as always, or not always, but sometimes, a very special guest, Charles Mullen. How's it going, guys?
Doing great. Good to be back, man.
Yeah, excited
After a
for
while.
excited to talk about the the Apes movies.
We will get to that other franchise that you mentioned at some point, I'm sure, because I know I think James really likes that one. I do as well. But no, today we're actually talking Planet of the Apes. We have a new one coming out at some point, I think maybe next year. That is the continuation of the Matt Reeves kind of new age of Planet of the Apes films. I'm very excited to see how that's going to turn out. Post Caesar and all that stuff. But we're just going to talk about the 9 films that have come out since 1968 up until 2017, which I don't know. I'm wondering if we all think that at least half of them are good ish.
Yeah,
But we'll get to that.
I would say
Enough.
Yeah,
Yeah, so they're at least fun. I know
mhm,
personally, right off the top, I'll say that I got into this franchise with the new ones. So with Rise On, that's what got me hooked with this franchise. And then I had to go back and check out a lot of the older ones, like the original and the sequels. And then we all watched the remake together. And I think it was the first time for me and James, but not for Charles.
Yep.
So yeah, had a good time watching through all these. So let's get into actually ranking these. We all pre-ranked these, before we started recording. And so how this works is we're just going to go through our list. So we're going to go starting with because there's 9 of these. So our number 9 to our number 1, and we're just going to go around. If we get to like a kind of like a common one that we're all saying, we can stop it and start talking about one of those movies. But if someone says a movie that's like in your, let's just say top 3 here, or should we do 5? Let's just do top 3.
Okay.
And if someone says a movie lower that is in your top 3, then you just say, wait for it, hold off on that, whatever you want to say to let us know that you have that a lot higher, so we could talk about that later when we get to what we all deem to be like the better of the movies.
mhm.
And yeah, so we'll just kind of go around, and then at the end we will have a kind of a singular ranking that we all mathematically have formed together. So very excited to get this started. So let's go ahead and start with James. James, what is your number 9?
I had the Planet of the Apes remake at number 9.
Okay, Charles, what is your number 9?
The Tim Burton Planet of the Apes. I think the same one that James
Yep.
mentioned. Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
remake, I guess.
I actually had Escape from the Planet of the Apes at 9.
Wow,
So we can go ahead because
Okay.
I don't have
that is
the
fascinating.
I don't
That
have
is.
the remake that much higher.
Mhm.
So let's go ahead and talk about the remake. This is one fresh in our minds because we all watched this together.
That's true.
All right, yeah. So we can go ahead and start talking about the Planet of the Apes remake. It's fresh on all of our minds now because
Mhm.
we all just watched this together. But yeah, James, if you want to go ahead and start, since it's your number 9.
Yeah, sure. So this one, I feel like it wouldn't necessarily matter at what point, like in this series, or like at what time in your life you watch this. Like if you watch all the other ones and how they like had this story initially, I think it's just too much of a 180 from what to expect from the other ones. You don't really, I don't know. The opening line is, it just kind of reverses what the other ones do. Like, you get the whole "take your stinking hand off me, you damn dirty human." Like, I get that they tried to like call that back, but to me, it just didn't work. I really like. I know I was talking about this when we were watching this, but no, like they can of course talk to each other, which I think I was telling Charles at least. Like I thought you could hear the people speaking English to each other and then the apes speak English, but you just knew they could talk to each other that way, and that's how you understood them. But then they started talking to each other, and it kind of goes off the rails. There's no kind of like, I recall at least, there's no like, holy shit, they're talking apes moments like in the original one. The apes aren't like, holy shit, they're talking humans one like in the original one.
Mhm.
I think too much of it just kind of goes off the rails. This one's just it is. That's all I
Yeah.
had.
Yeah. Exactly. Charles, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, James, I'm really glad that you brought up the butchering of like "get your hands off me, you dirty human." It's even the mixing of that is like awkward. The music's louder than the line. If you look back at all of the other like prominent like first thing ape speak, first human speak moments, the audio track is completely removed, or the background mixing. So like the line stands out, but in this one it's like muddled, and you hear like horses like neighing in the background, and the music is like it's so strange to me. I honestly feel like the remake wasn't even like, it feels like it wasn't even a passion project from Tim Burton. It feels like the studio was just like, we got this reboot. We know you're great with like weird concepts. How do you feel about doing a Planet of the Apes remake? I think it's at its worst, it is insulting and boring. At its best, it has a lot of really funny moments that like don't make a lot of sense that we were laughing at when we were watching it.
That's true.
um,
Yeah.
I I think I think Chad, you're gonna probably share this when you talk, but I remember you talking about how it felt like just like a lot of action, and I agree with that. It feels like more of an action movie, but if you take all of the other Apes movies, the action couldn't even be near enough or far away enough of a focus. The movies are never about action. They're supposed to be about philosophical, scientific discussions, morality, but there are none of those conversations in this movie. It's kind of shocking. You think there's going to be some kind of conversation about equality, races, rights. None of those conversations are had. Instead of, it turns into kind of like an escape movie or road movie. um, it doesn't make any sense in terms of the logic either. It doesn't, the humans being able to all speak to each other, having intelligence, having a culture, it makes it even more difficult to understand why humans are on such the of a lower rung than the apes, because by the end of the movie they also outnumber the apes as well in the final sequence. So that's also confusing too. It's a very strange movie. I think the last thing I wanted to talk about with this one, or the last two things, are the characterization is so awkward in this movie too. Instead of taking like lovable characters like Kira and Cornelius, they get rid of Cornelius's character and they replace Kira with someone named Ari. And Ari is a woman played by Tim Burton's wife, Helen Bonham Carter, who's amazing in everything. She's fine in this. It's not her fault, but like her character is nothing. She's someone that thinks humans are attractive and she likes having them as pets, but she is not a scientist. She is not a politician. She has no job. There's no role. Like, she's not even a leader. She's just someone that finds Marky Mark attractive and decides to follow him. It is such a butchering of that character and such a butchering of that journey. And so for most of the movie, we have like love triangle shots with all of them that are extremely awkward. And that once you notice it, it's just like impossible to ignore it. Um, if I had to pick one good thing about it, maybe it's I can't remember his name from he played John Adams.
Oh,
Shoot.
Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, Paul Giamatti's fun in that movie. I feel like he understood the assignment. He knew that this was like a B movie cheesiness and he just leaned into it and he was fun. I'll give him that. But I really don't like this movie.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. That seems to be like the common consensus for this one. Like, especially like when it first came out, and I feel like there hasn't been like a revitalization of it. Like some films, like say Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I'm sure we'll rank Indiana Jones films at some point.
Hmm.
Some people will return to that one and go, "Hey, actually, this might actually be a good movie, but just not a good like Indiana Jones movie or like whatever you have to say." I don't think anyone's ever revisited, at least from what I've seen, this remake and said, "Hey, actually, you know what? From back in the day, we didn't think Planet of the Apes remake from Tim Burton was a good movie, but it actually is." No
Yeah.
one's really been saying that, and I'm not even saying that. I didn't think this was a particularly good movie. I have this at number 8, so it's just like
Hmm.
right there.
Yeah.
And we will get to the reasons why I ranked Escape just one rung lower.
Hmm.
And it's probably not what you're thinking. But strictly on the remake, it's just such an interesting evolution, right, with the apes and humans evolution,
Hmm.
going from the originals to the remake to the new ones, where you have the originals, you have it, and it's very, they're just people in costumes. Sometimes it looks good when filmed right, and then
Yeah.
sometimes you go, I see their mouth moving in that helmet they're wearing. And then with the remake, you actually go, in some cases they look like bad Who's, like Ron Howard Who's
Oh
from like
yeah.
Dr. Seuss, How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they look really good. Like Tim Roth's character,
Hmm.
he looks really good. And I think he's because I agree, Paul Giamatti is great in it, and what he's doing is appropriate for the kind of movie that they're making. But I really like Tim Roth's like dedication to playing like this
Yeah.
like crazy villain. I think if you're looking for good things in it, I think some of the performances, like you just said with Paul Giamatti, are things to grasp onto. But I ranked it just a little bit higher because I think it's a more fun movie than like Escape is, and like kind of most of the older Planet of the Apes movies, they're not really necessarily like fun, and I think this one is a little more. Even though if it's not technically like a great like narrative story with character arcs and all that stuff that is satisfying, and I can see it from the perspective of um, it betrays what came before, kind of a deal. But I feel like they weren't trying to make the same movie that
Hmm.
came before. They're trying. Tim was trying to make something else, and he did. He made something else, all right. But
Yeah.
like the weird ape sex scene kind of a deal, kinky
Oh,
stuff
I
going on.
Oh,
forgot about
right.
the way the ape walked in. Like,
But yeah, we never got to see the conclusion of that. But maybe when Tim does a sequel to that one, we'll
hmm.
see that. But yeah, no, I mean you guys are essentially right, but it is also interesting how we have the older movies that are like essentially exactly what Charles said. It's kind of like Star Trek, where it's basically like very
Hmm.
little action, just mostly just people talking about philosophy and science. And then you have
Yeah.
this one that is kind of like they're trying to do what like J.J. Abrams did for Star Trek, where it's like now it's an action
Uh,
franchise now,
hmm.
kind of a deal, but not as good as what J.J. Abrams was able to do. Maybe if J.J. Abrams had done the 2001 Planet of the Apes, maybe it actually would have been better. Um, but it is, we get that, and then we get the newer ones that's kind of both. It's
Hmm.
action and it's like philosophy and morals and stuff like that. So it is cool to see that evolution, and I think the remake is kind of a middle of that evolution, where it's like, I don't know, you can look at it as like a parabola, where you're, is that the right word, where it's like
Yeah.
like a U-bend, where it's like great, dips down a lot, and then the bad is right there at the remake, and then it goes up again, kind of a
Yeah.
deal, like a roller coaster. In some ways, it's not a perfect analogy, but Yeah, so I had that one at number 8. I think it's fun. I had a great time watching it with you guys. I would rewatch it just for like a so bad it's good kind of perspective.
Mhm.
And I think it has value in that. And like I said, some of the performances aren't terrible, and the makeup. Did we look up to see if that makeup like got a nomination or anything? Because I
I think
think
it actually won an Academy Award. I think he
because I
won.
it was pretty incredible. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, it was that it's such a weird, crazy year 2001 where they're like, new millennium. Let's like start all these franchises, and you had Harry Potter start, you had Lord of the
Yeah,
Rings
that's
start, you
true.
had Planet of the Apes try to start, and and and, uh, and I remember like making a lot of like comparisons from Planet of the Apes to Lord of the Rings, and giving Charles a headache in doing so. So that was pretty fun. Yeah, we're gonna have to rank them Lord of the Rings at some point.
Oh, that'd be
I know
great.
That'd be
Charles
awesome.
would
Yeah,
love that. James,
I
yeah.
for
So
sure. Yeah.
I'm glad you said something about Tim Roth because he really deserves a better movie. He
it's
like
great.
I imagine him in the Matt Reeves Apes movies. He would have been great. He would
Like
have
a
fit.
Woody Harrelson type.
Yeah, he would have
Mhm.
fit right in. So I'm glad you
Yeah,
mentioned that. His performance is really impressive
he's
considering
such a great
everything.
actor.
Yeah.
All right, so we I think we're done with the remake for now, and we can move on to our 8. Um, so Charles, what is your number 8?
Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Beneath is your 8. Okay. All right, and my number 8 is Conquest of the Planet of the Apes.
Ah.
No, wait, no, I'm sorry. That's my number 7. Is the
Oh,
remake?
remake.
I didn't have
Yeah.
the remake on there. That's my 8.
Uh-oh, sneak peek of 7.
Yeah, sneak peek. Let me add that into my list. The remake. I didn't have it in there. That's why I was like confused. Okay, got that. So yeah, so Escape, remake, and then Conquest for me for 7. James, what is your 8?
Mine was actually also Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Beneath. Okay,
Dang, James, we are like in sync
you
right
guys
now.
are so far. Yeah,
I'm getting really sad for when that will eventually stop,
I
I'm
know.
sure.
I was
Yeah.
about to say, yeah. We'll have to see if one of you breaks each other's hearts.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, we could go ahead and talk about Beneath. That is not in my top 3. Yeah, Charles, you want to start with Beneath?
Yeah. Um I would have I there's a world I rank this at the bottom just because there's a lot of things I really, really dislike about this movie. But there are some moments of greatness sprinkled throughout, which kind of made me put it a little bit higher. I think to start off with the things I don't like, I really don't like that the first half hour is just a rehash of the first movie. There's really nothing new brought to it. The same conversations are repeated, the same plot. Taylor disappearing doesn't make any sense really. It's just like a mess. And whenever I
Yeah,
watch Beneath, I just feel like the first 30 or 40 minutes, I feel like the movie is intentionally wasting my time. Because like it just doesn't, there's nothing really happening in the first half hour, 40 minutes. So it's at a disadvantage there. The second disadvantage is the third act twist where they run into the humans and they're mutants that can mind control and create
Mhm.
illusions
Yeah.
because of radiation, I guess, and they worship the bomb. The worshiping the bomb is kind of an interesting concept and a cool one. It feels kind of Fallout y a little
yeah,
bit. But the mind control and illusion, it just reeks of someone like a bunch of writers in a room that were like, oh, let's have them encounter a human cult that worshipped a bomb. Oh, but that might not be crazy enough. What if they can make illusions too? Oh, I love that. But like we gotta go even crazier than that, dude. This is a Planet of Apes. Oh, what if they can mind control too? Like it just feels like the Gremlins 2 like pitch sketch that Key and Peele did. It doesn't make a lot of sense in tandem, and in practice, it doesn't work either. It creates some really uncomfortable scenes with Nova. The mind control kiss is awkward and uncomfortable to watch. The morals of the humans are sketchbook at best. We don't really understand why they are doing this, why they worship the bomb, why they are treating the humans, people that look like them, the way they do. It's very strange that they treat them almost with more indifference and hate than the apes themselves. And they keep saying they're pacifists, but instead they mind control the astronauts to try and kill each other. It's just a convoluted mess. But where it has a few strengths, there are a few wow moments. The ending in particular is really interesting, and I think it deserves a better movie, because I think that ending is kind of brilliant in a lot of ways and pretty ahead of its time. I also think Cornelius and Zira are once again like magnetic. They're in this movie for like 10 or 15 minutes, and you're just desperate to stay with them longer because they're so just good. They're like just, they're wholesome in a way. They're like your one moment of wholesome and so much chaos. And I wish they were in the movie for longer. I think there's a world where you combine this movie and the first Planet of the Apes, and you make a really solid 2 hour movie. And I kind of wish that someone was able to do that, because if you did that, I think you're able to keep the good stuff of Beneath, but you just kind of put that on the ending of Planet of the Apes as like another half hour or something. But yeah, it's a difficult movie.
Yeah, no, great points, Charles. It's one of those things to where, like, before I saw the Planet of the Apes sequels, like the original sequels, I didn't know like what they were, what the story was, like
Mhm.
what to expect. And they kind of all lumped together for me in a lot of ways. But like I think like the ones that kind of help me distinguish them from each other, um, are why I rank them the way that I did. So starting talking about Beneath, yeah, I found this one kind of interesting, and I remember like this was one where I was like, oh, this is the direction that they're taking it. This is actually kind of cool, kind of interesting. In that like they go beneath and they find these kind of like mutant people, and you're like slowly finding out like new things about them, and then it like leads to chaos with Taylor, you know, hitting the button and blowing everything up,
Mhm.
which I just think is a really cool ending.
Mhm.
You know, and I don't mind like the rest of the movie either. Where it's like them kind of like, you know, searching for Taylor, and you know, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean there's not really like that much more to grasp onto, but I did find like, you know, because like not none of these are really that long. You know, so there's not like much that happens in a lot of them. But when they do end up in the underground, I find it kind of interesting. And yeah,
Mhm.
like you were talking about, like with them worshiping the bomb, which is kind of an interesting thing. It did also remind me of Fallout. I was like, maybe that's where they got, you know, the idea for Fallout from, and or part of it, you know, because it's like a big, like influential sci-fi franchise, um, you know, and yeah, and so they kind of like steered heavy into the sci-fi with, you know, what if some humans existed from before everything went to shit or whatever, and they got deformed. But yeah, the whole mind control thing and the being able to communicate with beeps was kind of weird, you know, and it kind of steered the franchise a little bit more into like mystical kind of territory. But I don't know, like the next freaking movie, there's like time travel and a whole thing as well. So it really just kind of goes crazy before it gets like a little bit more normalized. You know, but yeah, we see these characters again, anyways. But yeah, Beneath I had at 5. I had it a little higher because I was like, I think like this is the one that I like enjoy more than the others. Maybe because it's so close to the original, which I have a little higher as well. Um, So yeah, I kind of dug Beneath a little more,
Hmm.
but yeah, James, what did you think about that one?
So yeah, this was number 8, pretty much just because it kept close enough to the original for the first like bit of it, like Charles was saying. It didn't go off the rails enough as the remake did, but I think I didn't really like it. Really started to get away with the whole kind of mind control, like Charles was explaining, like the extra abilities and everything they let the humans do, like that kind of took it out of it. And yeah, I haven't looked at it, but I wonder if that's where like maybe that group in Megaton from Fallout, maybe that's where they kind of got that from. If maybe some of the dialogue same or something, I don't know. They like to throw those Easter eggs in for
Hmm.
the side remakes. This I'm gonna talk about this now because like this kind of thing just excites me, and this really speaks more toward how much attention they paid in the prequel series, but the emblem, one of the fins of the bomb, is the Alpha Omega symbol, which is the same name of the group from War of the Planet of the Apes. So I'm wondering if there's going to be
Oh,
some kind of connection in Kingdom, because we don't know
good
how
catch.
much of the Earth, how much of the people died in the war, how, across
Hmm.
like the country, the world, things like that. But they pay attention, and that's why they're so good. But that emblem on the fin of the nuke is the same emblem from that fanatic group led by Woody Harrelson in the third one. It's the Alpha Omega. I caught that
That's really
immediately and was like,
cool.
that could be interesting. And it really, I'm not going to talk about the sequels yet, prequels yet, but aside from that, there's little kind of bits here and there which speaks more to the prequels. This I just didn't really end up liking this one. It just went kind of too off the rails for me towards
Hmm.
the end.
It's a good catch, James.
So
I did not even recognize that before.
That was
me
one of the
neither.
first things I caught, to be honest.
Hmm.
Me neither. So like maybe we see like underground weird mutants in Kingdom.
Maybe
Yeah.
they try to make it make sense.
We didn't see Woody Harrelson technically die. He could come back and be beeping and booping all
uh,
for the whole Kingdom movie.
Hollywood
I'm up
loves its
for it.
off-screen
He did.
deaths.
He did go mute, so we'll see. Um, all right, so we'll move on to sevens. I've already said what mine is. My 7 is Conquest.
Hmm.
James, what is your 7?
Mine is also Conquest.
Okay. Uh,
And
Charles, are you Conquest?
this is nope, and this is when we start getting different, y'all. Mine is Battle of the Planet of the Apes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So let me tally these. I got 7. I got 7. 7 for Battle for Charles. Okay, cool. All right, so we can go ahead and talk about Conquest, and Charles, you can say where that is when you start talking about
Sure,
it.
that sounds good.
Um, yeah, I'll start with this one. Conquest is interesting, coming from off of Escape, where it's you don't have Zora and God, what's his name? Tell me. Zora
Cornelius.
and Cornelius. You
Cornelius,
don't
yeah.
have them anymore. Instead, you have their son, Caesar, or he named himself Caesar, I think, or got named by the circus guy,
He
Caesar.
got named by the
Yeah.
circus guy.
So I
Yeah.
thought. Yeah, so you get to see him, and he's, kind of like on his own trying to figure things out. And now you have the whole prophecy that has been told that, all of the cats and dogs have died, which is freaking terrible. Something that I hate about this franchise is they talk about all the people's pets died, and then now they're making the apes the pets in kind of a way to get it to be to where they have a reason to evolve more and break out and take over everything, I guess. um so it's kind of a weird concept. I don't super dislike this one. I think and I think Charles will probably talk about this because he was talking about this the other day, is
Hmm.
Roddy McDowell is really good as both Cornelius and Caesar in those roles. And I didn't get that the first time watching through. And then when Charles said something, I was like honing in on the performance, and I was like, this dude is pretty good. So like, if there's a highlight in any of these movies, he's one of them for sure. Yeah, I thought the like the kind of psychedelic, like music and colors was kind of interesting and weird.
Yeah.
Such a weird choice. I don't know. There's really not much to this movie. There's not much of a story there. It's just like Caesar. It's kind of like what we see in the later movies developed better, but a more primitive kind of outline of what could happen and how they would get from point A to point B with this uprising. The ending is kind of interesting, where you have kind of like the head to head face off kind of a deal, and there's just a big action stuff. So there you get some action in the sequels, but it's not too much. I don't know. There's not much else to say about this one. That's why it's my number 7.
Mhm.
Um, Close to the bottom of the barrel. But none of these, in my opinion, are 100% terrible. There's always something positive to say, but we're still, I think, in the mostly negative space. James, what do you think about Conquest?
Yeah, I found this one kind of interesting, but I don't think interesting as the other ones. Yeah, the whole concept of the pets dying was okay enough to me. Like it at least explained why, but I don't think it was maybe the best story or the best way to kind of start. This it was kind of interesting though, 'cause, like it does kind of like you said, it kind of breaks away from like the first two and even escape because it's take place in the 90s or something like that, so it's a whole kind of new era, like a time era too. Interestingly, you do get kind of a cool like monologue at the end there, which almost kind of threw me for a loop. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, like so we can get like kind of deep with this, like there is a bit of like passion and emotion in here, and you kind of see
Yeah.
that in the end. And I actually that caught me off guard. I liked it a lot, but I think some of the stories from the other ones were just a little bit better, kind of overall, kind of throughout the whole movie. But Conquest, it was interesting towards the end there. I did like the end of it.
Nice, nice. Charles, take it away.
Yeah,
Where
I'm so
where did you
glad you
have
mentioned the
this?
ending. I have Conquest at number 5.
Okay.
I'm gonna champion the movie a little bit
All
here, but I'm
right.
gonna acknowledge that it is a mess. It is an absolute mess of a movie. But I'm so glad you mentioned the ending, James. I'm gonna get to
Hmm.
that in a second, but the ending of the movie is incredible. Um, I think it's really. I think the biggest credit I'm giving it is how far ahead of time this movie is. Like, if I had to pick one movie out of the 5 that's super ahead of its time, it would be this one. The conversations that they have when this movie came out in the early 70s, the conversations they're having about eugenics, immigration, slavery, racism, protest is incredibly ahead of its time. And it's especially risky considering this is like a year or two after Martin Luther King was assassinated. There, this could have been a movie that ended careers if it went badly. Um, and luckily it's only the only, at least in my opinion, the only bad stuff is it gets a little ridiculously cartoonish at times. And so that's when I want to get into the negatives here a little bit, is that like I think there are a lot of scenes in the middle of the movie which I think is the weakest part, where they're wanting you to feel really bad about what the apes are being forced to do, but it's with the music that you mentioned, Chad, and the colors, it gives off this like comical farce, like especially when Caesar is being like escorted through the compound, and it like looks like like I can't even figure out the geometry of the area that they're in. It reminded me, this is going to be very strange, it reminded me of the ending of the new Suspiria. Like the inside of it was cavernous and the colors were weird, and it just I was just like, they're just like a random human with a flamethrower. Like, I'm like, they must have just found a bunch of random things on the backlot and were like, oh, we can have our humans hold this in the scene, because it doesn't make any sense at all. Um, and so there are a lot of moments where I would just start laughing, and then I would feel guilty because I'm like, oh, I probably shouldn't have laughed at that. But the good stuff is so good here. I think there are moments when it's aiming. I think it's the most satire-esque movie out of all of them. There's some really great moments that it feels like they're really hardcore lampooning bureaucracy. All like there are so many scenes where it's like a human at a desk being told, okay, well, you're gonna have to file that complaint with the ape branch in sector 213. I'm in sector 201, and it's just like mindless babble. And then if like the guy wants to do anything, the governor, he has to get approval by all these other people, and it's just like it just feels like a lampooning of like how many steps progress needs to go through until progress is made. I think the other thing that I wanted to talk about from this movie, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes, is obviously Roddy McDowall's performance is really incredible. And I feel like without him, I feel like a lot of people think about Taylor and his character in the first movie, but I would say the soul of the movie is really with Roddy McDowall. Without him, I don't think this franchise, the original five, would work at all. And Roddy McDowall is incredible in this movie. And there's a line that he says to McDonald, I think, who's kind of the human friend in this one. He says, "You of all people should understand, we cannot be free unless we have power." Such a great line. Also, way ahead of its time. That was something that was championed by Black Lives Matter years ago. And it's just full of pathos when he says that to Malcolm, of all people, because Malcolm in the movie is African American, and even mentions his fight for equal rights, which in real time would have occurred 2 years ago, or had just finished 2 years ago. So there's just so much to love about what it's striving for as a science fiction movie here, and that line is extremely powerful. But I think the biggest thing I want to talk about, even though I'd love to talk about Khan as well, because Khan is in this movie for a hot minute, but he's great. The ending of this movie, this might be a hot take, but I think it's the best ending out of all of the Apes movies, including the new ones. Because from the last like 25 minutes, it is pure, unadulterated chaos. And if you see the original ending that they didn't edit out because the MPA was really upset about the ending of this movie, then you see a ton of violence, a lot of noise. You see human beings basically being beaten to death by apes. You see a lot of blood in the original ending. And then it all finishes on the steps, almost kind of like it's a steps to a monument. And Caesar is right up there, and he has a choice, do we stop the revolution here and go into seclusion, or do we like end it through violence and kill this governor? In the theatrical version, he pardons the governor after his soon-to-be wife speaks for the first time and says Caesar, and Malcolm also argues against it too. But in the original ending, he gives this incredible monologue, which most of it is still in the theatrical. And like you said, James, that monologue is so good. It's Shakespearean. Like I can
It
see
was
people
interesting to hear that at the end
yeah,
of that
like
movie.
just the passion that Roddy
I was not
McDowall
expecting
performs
it.
that with. I love how he literally is just like, why would you want me to stop here when we were treated as slaves? Like, how could we even show empathy to people that treated us like that? And it's such a good point. And the original ending ends with them killing the governor violently. It just ends with blood. The governor's dead, and cut to credits. I wish it went to theaters with that ending because I think it's more powerful, it's more realistic. But I can understand why it didn't. 2 years after the civil rights movement ended, 2 years after the assassination of Martin Luther King, I can see why they didn't leave that in. But I think even though I agree that there's a lot of faults with this movie, I think there's a lot to admire about this movie. And I think this is that movie out of all of the original five is probably the one I could probably go back to the most and get something new out of.
Yeah, well, very well said. Makes me want to rewatch it now. But yeah, so great. So that was Conquest. So now we're moving on to our sixes. 9, 6. James, what's your 6?
I had Battle for Planet of the Apes.
And that is also my 6. Charles, what is your 6?
My 6. My 6 is, oh gosh, this is I'm sorry for this, y'all. The original Planet of the Apes.
Interesting.
Yeah, let's wait for that one. Wait for it.
Yeah, actually, for me too, it is also a wait for it.
Charles, you were doing so good there.
I know.
All right, so let me the original got a 6 on there. Okay. And James's 6 was Battle. And Battle's my 7. Wait, no. Is it my 7?
Battle
Thought
is
you had
my 7.
Conquest at 7.
9,
Or
8.
no, Battle is my 8. Sorry.
Battle is my 6.
Wait, no, Battle is my 7 too. I messed up my list. I'm just gonna stop keeping track.
Okay.
I messed up my list.
So let me get this straight before we continue.
Yeah.
Um everybody say their 9s, or James 9.
The Planet remake, Tim Burton.
That's right, and that was also Charles's.
Yep.
And my 9 was Escape. So we only have one vote for Escape right now. So then Beneath was two people's 8s.
Mine.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Same.
And then the remake was my 8.
Mm-hmm.
So for 7s, two people had Conquest. That was
Yep.
obviously not Charles. And so Charles, what was your 7?
My 7 was Battle.
Okay. Okay. All right, so we can go ahead and talk about Battle. Sounds good. James, you want to start with Battle?
Yeah, so I liked a lot of like the kind of like conflict in this, both from like the ape side and the human side. Like I think it's pretty cool that you get like the general conflict as well. Like it almost like I thought it was a little more interesting. I kind of like a little of like the action. So for this one to keep consistent with that throughout the movie for the most part, I think it was just a little bit more interesting to me. Some of like the other ones I ranked lower. I think that's pretty much why I liked it the most. And you kind of get some interesting takes, like the little like ape kids playing more with each other, and even like the adults being like, kind of stop doing that. Like we don't really want that or anything like that. That was kind of interesting to me, and I think this one, I just kind of liked the action aspect of this more so than some of the other movies that were ranked lower.
Perfect. Charles, Battle.
Yeah, Battle. I enjoyed it. Like James said, there are a lot of cool things in this, but I felt like the lack of a budget for this movie really hurt its chance to be great, and it felt a lot less well thought out than some of the previous ones. I think the cool things was to see kind of the skeleton of what would eventually become Koba in this movie. General Aldo is like a very early version of it, and so it's kind of cool to see an early version of that story. Obviously not done with near as much depth. In this movie, it's just kind of like, oh, gorillas are violent and bad, and it's just kind of a weird kind of note for the film to take, considering its stance on race in other movies. But I think the most fascinating part I found in this movie was I think it's our only chance at really seeing a human and ape colony like work together for a little while. And it's kind of surprising when you consider that like none of the other movies really show that, even the new ones. And so I really enjoyed actually seeing that aspect. I loved the sequence in the beginning with the teacher like breaking down and saying no, and then everything stopping. What a great moment. Also, that kind of feels like it's calling out to the future and Rise as well, with the significance of that word no. So it was so cool to see like everybody stop, and I was just like, oh, where's Malfoy? So that was fun. And so I love that aspect of it. But the stuff that I didn't like was the budget really hurts the battle at the end of this movie. I don't know about you, but when I was watching the battle, I was just like, what's happening? Like, I don't understand. It felt like I was watching, I don't know if you've ever been to a Civil War reenactment, but it felt like that. Like the humans were walking very slow,
I see
like
that.
just
Yeah.
shooting randomly. It looked like smoke being fired. You have no idea where any of the people are. You have no idea why they're walking so slowly, like what's happening. But it at least is saved by kind of an interesting strategy by Caesar at the end, where he's just like, everybody act like you're dead. And then they kind of trick him at the end. And that was a nice little touch. I think the last thing I wanted to say about this movie is I feel like the message of this movie is also unclear. I was trying to figure out what it was really trying to say. Because like Conquest, you come away with that with all its other faults pretty clear on what its message is. Because it makes it pretty clear in the monologue. But at the end of this, I was just like, is the movie trying to say something about education, how we educate our children? Is it trying to say something about war? Is it trying to say something about radiation or nuclear weapons? I just didn't really understand what its overall message was. And it really hurt my enjoyment of the trilogy or my enjoyment of the movie. But I think uh, this movie was the first time where I got to like really get excited for the new trilogy, though, because there's so much here that's taken and mastered in the new trilogy. Even the stuff that's happening with his son in the movie and the final confrontation between Aldo and Caesar. Yes, it doesn't happen at the top of a skyscraper, but it happens at the top of a tree. It's just, it's cool to see like the skeletons, the early draft, and then just like taken and just really mastered in the new ones. So that's cool.
Charles, I mean, I was legitimately just about to say exactly what you just said. Is that like the best thing that the original franchise did was to have to gather those building blocks that Reeves and the guy who did Rise
Yeah.
would take and start to build this grand trilogy that I think is so great. And then we're continuing on from there to see, hopefully it continues to be really good, because it's like one of those things to where it's like the trilogy is so good that if they just left it there, it'd be fine. But
Yeah.
now moving on, it's like, hopefully they have some sort of idea to build a new trilogy. But now they probably have like less building blocks from the original franchise,
Mhm.
unless they can find something in there that we're not seeing about ape civilization and stuff like that. But yeah, battle itself, I did think was pretty interesting. I kind of lump a lot of these sequels, like I said from the beginning, the originals movies sequels, together a lot, because I feel like they're all like good, but like not like really great. They all have some fun stuff and like interesting stuff to grasp onto,
Yeah.
but like the full movie, and I know Charles loves Conquest, and even you said that like the middle of the movie is not so great. So like
Mhm.
even that
It's a
movie
mess.
has like a good portion of it that you might even just want to skip over.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's why we are all kind of ranking a lot of these lower, because the original might be great, the new trilogy might be great, but the remake and the sequels are just kind of like not really up to par as like fully fledged like cinematic films
Mhm.
and stuff like that. Although we have our difference of opinions of which of the sequels are better than others, and where we rank those. But yeah,
Yeah.
Battle I ranked somewhere in the middle. It's my six. So it's everything that Charles was basically saying about the positives. I really enjoyed a lot of that stuff. I liked the relationship between Caesar and his kid. I thought that was heartbreaking that the kid
Mhm.
dies, but that's a lot of that stuff happens in the new movies as well. Caesar's family it gets harmed or attacked or threatened. Um, and those relationships and stuff really kind of ground the movie and connect you to the characters a little bit. Um, that was really devastating to watch, that part, because this adorable little ape kid.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I mean, they still had like a lot of the discussions and stuff like that. They were talking about death, and you got the one guy, the one orangutan that just kept talking the whole time when they were walking and getting weapons and stuff like that. So I got a good amount of enjoyment out of it, but ultimately not like super high in my ranking either. So
You know what you
um,
just reminded me of? The ape. Remember the ape that was guarding the weapons and
Yeah.
like would have to ask those 3 questions.
Yeah, the
I
boring
thought that
questions.
was so great. It was like I was just like, man, like now the apes are getting into gun control. Like what is going on here? No topic is left untouched.
Well, don't they do that at the end of battle, is where they like lock
Hmm.
up all the guns and then they're like, hopefully
Yeah.
we never have to like bust this out, and they try to make like a more perfect society, and you
Yeah.
have the apes and the humans living amongst each other, and one ape is like, the wise man or whatever is like now, or the lawgiver, what is his name,
Yeah,
is
I think the
now
lawgiver.
teaching both apes and human kids alike, and stuff like that. So I also think that's another reason why this one is a little bit higher on my list as well, is because it has like really good messaging.
Yeah.
But yeah, that aside, we discussed battle, so now on to our fives.
Hmm.
Yeah,
um
I think our fives.
Actually, wait, I already know. Charles, no, Charles, your five was conquest.
Yes.
My five was beneath. James, what is your five?
I had Escape
Okay.
5.
All right, that was my 9. Um, so we can go ahead and
We can
discuss,
talk
because
about
we have
that.
fives all said. We can discuss escape now.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and start, because I know you guys are both going to have a lot of positive things, and I do as well. I thought escape was really interesting, but I also have like just like a big problem with, and I think this affects the entire sequels of the original movie, because obviously I had the original ranked pretty high, but this one I had ranked 9, and I knew it was going to be a hot take because I know most people rank the remake 9, and kind of go from there. But I honestly didn't know what to expect with the sequels. I was like,
Hmm.
are people going to rank like the new ones lower and some of the sequels high? I have no idea. Um, so I kind of like lumped them in how I could, but this one I put at 9, because while I think it's interesting, it's like after Beneath, you get the bomb explode, and you're like, okay, where do you go from there if you're gonna have a third movie? And they're like, all right, well, we're gonna send these 2 characters that people like back in time, and then they're gonna kind of be the catalyst to set all the inciting incident to set all of the the dominoes in motion to create the Planet of the Apes and create the Neo, or whatever, the hero of the Planet of the Apes, and Caesar. And that's kind of like their whole purpose. And yeah, it does get into a lot of really good conversation about, the humans are like, wait, did she just say that she dissected humans? And then,
Hmm.
when they're basically going to sterilize her and kill her baby,
Yeah.
she's like, well, I did that to them. So who's the bad person? I don't even
Hmm.
know, kind of a deal. So it does get into some really good, like, moral discussion. There's a lot of that I think is really, really cool. And it's like the really weird, like, montage of them trying on clothes. These movies
Shopping.
are these movies are definitely of their time. You have in Conquest, you have the psychedelic stuff, and then you have this weird montage that's like in some
Zero goes to a
rom-com.
feminist conference. It's like speaking for women everywhere. It was great.
But yeah, so I mean, there is a lot of stuff to get into. It's very silly. So negatives. I think this one most of all, because it's mostly these two. Well, it was 3, but then 2 apes talking to humans. I feel like this is the one mostly that you kind of breaks the immersion when you see their full human mouths, actor mouths, inside of the ape head, like, moving. And I'm like, I feel like, the way it was shot, like if you look at the original movie, I'm sitting there looking and I'm like, can I see human mouths in there? And I don't think in really any of the other movies you see that. I feel like they're able to like shoot it from like a unique perspective, or maybe I don't know, because it's like outside a lot or there's action going on. You can't really pay attention to the mouths moving. So that a little bit like kind of took me out. But also like my biggest thing, and I do have one more positive. I'll add that in there. I like the part at the very beginning in the zoo when they're trying to have Zora do the blocks and get the banana, and she's like just kind of being like I'm a scientist, I can do this, because you have like that, you kind of have that too where you have people from other countries come to America and they'll be scientists in their own country. They'll come to America and then people are like, oh, so you're a janitor now, and they're like, I'm a scientist or I'm a doctor. And then it's like they have to like work from the ground up to prove that they're a doctor in America rather than. So it's got kind of like reminded me of that here too, where it's like we're trying to see if you can do simple shapes, and she's kind of being like this little asshole, like I can do it like easily, just showing off. And Cornelius is like, bro, cool it. And then I love when she tries to go get the banana and she's like, I hate bananas. And then everyone loses their shit when they find out she can talk. But I do think the negative is basically the ending and like everything that it sets up. Is I don't like the cats and dogs all dying so the apes become pets. Like I find that like such a weak kind of like method to get to from point A to point B. Whereas I find it way more interesting in the new ones where it's like more so like animal testing, and they're not apes from the completed Planet of the Apes colony traveling back in time for some reason to then proceed to build the Planet of the Apes, and there's a whole paradox thing there or something like that. That I don't really like how they explain it that way. And then the ending I find like so shocking, where it's like I don't know what it's trying to say, where it's like my baby is so important that I'll take this other chimp, kill it, and then throw it off of like into the water or whatever. Like I was like, am I seeing the right thing here? Did they just actually do this at the end of this Planet of the Apes movie? And so like it just really, I can't even watch that ending anymore. So that's why I rank this one last, is because the ending just really upsets me and I just do not like it at all. Um, Despite that, I do think it has a lot of really interesting stuff in the beginning, which is why I'm assuming you guys ranked it higher, um, because you like that stuff. And I think that's totally fair because it does have a lot of really cool stuff and ideas in it. But that's exactly what we're saying, is a lot of these sequels have great ideas, maybe not the best execution overall. James, Escape.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think, I mean, you hit the nail on the head for a lot of it. It is kind of why I rank this higher because I just like so much of what like the beginning of the movie had. I
Mhm.
like the whole like apes on the run bit. That was interesting. I mean, to me, I don't really mind the whole like makeup faux pas with being able to see what their mask like. But by this movie, I've been, I think, ties to it, and it's the late '60s, early '70s. Like, I mean, how, like, what are you actually going to get from that time frame? Like, I can excuse most of that. I thought like some of
Mhm.
the like the moral and philosophical questions were really interesting, but I think like most of it was more. It was way different from Beneath from the Apes. It just kind of in like the tone and the pace. I think it helps that the sequels almost went the way they did, just because it kind of, I think it kept to what Escape kind of stuff. And I will agree at the end, like it was weird watching like throw like the baby off the ship. That was I didn't really 100% get that, but I think I liked enough of it as it was before that to kind of rank this one higher. Yeah.
Definitely. And wait, you had this at 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Charles, where did you have this one?
I actually had this in my top three. I had this at
Oh,
number 3 to be
wow.
exact. Um,
You didn't say wait for it, but that's okay. You don't have
yeah,
to.
I didn't say for it for this one because I knew that it wasn't going to be ranked as high for both of you. Um, I'm definitely going to champion this movie again. I think that this is once again a movie with a lot of flaws, but I think if I had to pick the one that's execute that just in terms of story, character, ideas, I think the one that's executed the tightest and the best is this one. Even more than the OG, because I'll talk about my feelings on the OG after rewatching it for I think the sixth time recently. The I think the first thing that I want to talk about with Escape is Zero and Cornelius. They're, I think, the heart of these movies. Even in Conquest and Battle, their effect and impact is still felt. Caesar still feels their deaths in the fourth movie, and then you even get to hear their voice in the fifth movie. They're the heart of this franchise, at least in the beginning. And I love that we just got a movie just completely focused on them. It felt like they finally understood that like audiences really love Zier and Cornelius. Hey, let's just give them a whole movie with them. And so you get this kind of movie that's kind of bonkers sometimes. It's a classic fish out of water story. It almost sometimes feels like you're watching Big, but with apes at times, which can kind of give it a kind of really relaxed feel. But that's what's kind of great about this movie is this might be the most tragic movie out of all of the Apes movies. It's a classic story. Both heroes and villains are both trying to prevent the inevitable human collapse. Huzira and Cornelius are every move they are making this movie is to prevent the downfall of humanity. They are constantly talking as much as possible to their allies, talking about what needs to change about human society. They're talking about what needs to change about ape culture and ape society. They're talking in front of Congress. They're going on PR like movements. They're actually desperately trying to save a race that doesn't want to save itself. And it's kind of sad and tragic to see it happen. And then the villains, as much as I really don't like Dr. Hassline, especially for his actions at the end of this movie, he has a point. He is a villain, but he has a point. He's being given information that humanity is going to be wiped out basically in the future. And he's told to kind of ignore it and kind of move on. And from a scientific aspect, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, of course, he's going to go into it. But his methods, instead of taking the empathy approach that Zier and Cornelius take, where they spend time building relationships with other people, trying to understand human culture, Dr. Hassline instead uses imprisonment, torture, experimentation, and eventually murder. And he uses those techniques to try and prevent the downfall of humanity. But the great part of this story is that both fail. Zero and Cornelius's method of empathy is just not, unfortunately, enough, which is why we get Caesar's violent uprising later on. That works, at least in that universe at that time. But Zier and Cornelius, it's so tragic to see them desperately trying to connect with a society that Taylor's from, try and save basically his world for them, for him. And at every turn, they're basically turned away or taken advantage of. And it gets really dark with the eugenics aspect of it as well when you hear them having conversations. I think the conversations between the president and the doctor were surprisingly insightful. It was really fun to see a president in a movie like this actually be kind of competent and be like, well, the people love the apes. Why would I kill the apes? Like, you're talking about eugenics, sir? Like, I don't think we should be like pushing back on this doctor was kind of refreshing to see. And then I think it's not the final confrontation, but the big scene where Cornelius and Zero are taken to the army base for the first time and are being interrogated by the doctor. That's such an incredible scene where both characters in that movie are being pressured. Zero and Cornelius are being pressured by the doctor on their answers about possibly experimenting on humans in their present. But then the doctor's being pushed on by being told that, like, we are not like you. We are worth surviving. We are worth protecting, and we would love to protect you and save you, but we can't save you if you won't let us. It's some incredible conversations. I think I understand kind of why you don't like the ending that much, Chad, and I think I'm going to defend it a little bit here. I think the ending works here because of what we get in Conquest and Battle. It is sad, it's tragic, and It seems cold also that Zira throws the baby off the ship. But for me, it makes sense from a scientific standpoint. Zira has always applied a scientific outlook to things. Cornelius is the one that's usually arguing for empathy in times. Well, Cornelius is dead at this point, and so he's no longer there in the empathy side. Zira's left with her scientific side, and so she's going to still do whatever she can to save her child, which we now know is back at the circus. And so she's going, in my opinion, she throws the baby off the ship so it's harder to identify as their baby, or it could possibly get lost in the ocean or, sink to the bottom. It's dark, but from a scientific standpoint, it makes sense why she would want to get rid of any evidence whatsoever that Caesar is still alive or Milo is still alive. It's hard to watch though, too, Chad. I will say I had to pause it several times because it was just too difficult to watch them die again. But I would think if the ending was different, I think it would lessen the impact of the movie.
So I definitely understand everything you said, and it makes a lot of sense. And I also like approached it from that same thing where I'm like, I know like a lot of this actually makes sense in the story they're trying to tell, but I still think it does a disservice to the movie and the franchise itself because you have Cornelius and Zira that
Zira, yeah.
you said is are characters that everybody likes, but to me, that makes me hate them. Is what they would do to an innocent chimp like that. So I think that's like where it goes from. Like a story can make complete sense, but you can still hate it because of like what it does, and it's kind of like, and that, like you said, you had to pause it. I just skip over it. It's kind of like the dog scene in John Wick. Skip that scene every time
Mm-hmm.
now. I've seen it. Don't need to see it again. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like this, and I feel like a movie like me personally that I would have to skip the ending every time now is just kind of like one I'm just going to rank like a lot lower, despite a lot of the positives and the stuff that you're saying. Like it does make me want to rewatch most of the movie, but like I don't know, it's also just kind of weird that it has like very very like tones that kind of clash where
Yep.
it's like you have, if you want to make this like very dark movie that's like super heavy, make that movie, but tell us that from the beginning. Don't make this silly movie where she's like, and I hate bananas, and then trying on clothes, and then later she's killing an innocent chimp at the end. I
Well,
don't
she
see
didn't kill the
all of
chimp.
this.
The chimp was shot by the doctor.
Either way,
The chimp was already dead.
I understand that, but like she still like took it into harm's way. She still, kind of like everything they did turned this into what happened at the end.
Well, she was being hunted, though. They were in hiding.
All I'm just
Like,
saying
they didn't mean
is,
to put the chimp in harm's way. They were just trying to hide.
but they did. And they didn't hide well enough. Is all I'm saying. So I hate
Chad,
the
I feel
ending,
like you're
and
being way too hard on. They're the only two apes on the planet. They're on the run. They have no money, no communication. They're hiding in a random abandoned ship.
they shouldn't have taken the chimp.
Well, if they, but like, a devil's advocate, if they didn't switch the chimp, that's Caesar dead, and then all of the apes are dead.
That's fine. Anyways,
but then we don't get conquest in battle, Chad.
I'm fine with that, to be honest. I'm fine with that because we have better movies to talk about next. So let's move on to our what are we at? Number 4s?
Yeah, 4.
All right. So who I don't know. Charles, what was your 4?
4. Shoot. Let me look at it here.
The OG
4
was your 6.
Yes, 4 was Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
That is also my 4. James, what is your 4?
That is my number 4.
Oh, right across the board. That might be the only one we'll see. I don't know. We got a few more coming up. All right. Perfect. Okay, so we can go ahead and talk about Rise of the Planet of the Apes. We are officially in the new trilogy.
Thank God.
I'll go ahead and start with this one as well. This one is interesting because I remember, because like I said, this was my introduction to the entire series.
Mhm.
And when I first saw the trailers for it, I was like, a Planet of the Apes thing that's like just a bunch of CGI. This is going to be stupid. And then, I finally saw it. I didn't probably get around to this one, I think, until after Dawn had already come out. And so then I watched Rise and then watched Dawn. But Rise, I think, is freaking amazing. And I love it so
Yeah.
much. I didn't realize then that it wasn't CGI. It's motion capture. It's the same technology they used with Gollum and the Lord of the Rings. And it's just, and I think it's, even sharper here because as technology goes on, it just gets better and better and better. Gollum walked so Caesar could run. And then I think
That's
that,
good.
or
I like
swing,
that.
swing, climb.
I'm
Uh,
imagining like literally a video where it's just Gollum running, and then all of a sudden he like transforms into Caesar.
There you go. Go ahead and
That's
make
great.
that. But yeah, I love the character of Caesar. I love his arc throughout the whole trilogy, and I just think it's a really fantastic arc here. I was talking about before, where I kind of hated what they did to be like, this is how we get from regular the world you live in right now, viewer, to the Planet of the Apes world. And I like how they took it in a different approach where it's more of the animal testing and stuff like that. A lot of that is very hard to watch.
Hmm.
You have dark stuff in this movie as well, where at one point they have to euthanize like all the apes.
Yeah.
Thankfully, you don't actually see it. Nobody throws an ape off of a ship, but you just know that it happens,
Not in
and
this
that's
day and
enough.
age.
But yeah, it's not the '70s anymore. Um, but I love James Franco as the scientist because he like actually has a heart. He takes Caesar home, raises him. He's trying to heal his father, who is John Lithgow, and who has Alzheimer's, and is trying to find a cure for that. And so that's his reasoning for doing what he does, and stuff. And yeah, a lot of the stuff that they're doing is terrible, but you can see why they would do it, even though myself and PETA and a lot of other people will probably very much so disagree in their methods. But they use a lot of kind of similar things, but it's not like time traveling apes. It's just regular apes at this point that they do the blocks and stuff and try to test their learning. And then they give them the drug, they get smarter. And then they're, can we use this on humans to cure Alzheimer's and stuff like that? And then it goes into the whole story of this one ape that gets smarter, um, learns really fast, gets sent to ape jail, and then I love the whole thing to where he gets so smart that he goes above James Franco's intelligence. Even he's like,
Yeah.
in there, and he goes to James Franco goes to get him, and he closes the cell back, and he's like, no, I have no words are spoken for this. It's just all action. You totally get everything that's going on just based on the story they're telling and the actions, body language and everything. He closes the cell, and he's like, I can free all of these apes because this is wrong, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna do what you couldn't do, to free all those apes that had to be euthanized, and I'm going to get all these apes out of here, and we're going to be where we belong in the wilderness and swinging free and stuff like that. So I love how he takes over, goes up to the biggest baddest guy and gets on his side that everybody else is afraid of, and stuff like that. And ultimately it's a prison break movie
Yeah.
too. Like a big portion of it is a prison break movie. And those are some of my favorites. Shawshank is one of my favorite movies of all time. And you get it in the Planet of the Apes movie. I don't know. This movie is incredible. Yeah, you also got Draco Malfoy in there, like Charles said, which is
Love
amazing.
them.
Mhm.
And I don't know. It's just such a great movie with a really great arc, really great characters in it. Even like the James Franco's love interest is great. Oh, is it Chiwetel Ejiofor that is the other guy, the scientist guy?
I don't think so.
No, that's
It's the
another
actor from
guy.
Selma.
Yeah, David Oyelowo or whatever his
Oh,
name
yes,
is.
yes.
I
I
think that's the
confuse
last
those
name,
2
but yeah,
actors a
yeah,
lot. I'm
yeah,
thinking of 12 Years a Slave, guy.
right, yeah.
Um, but yeah, anyways, this movie's fantastic. It's number 4, but it's also number 1 in my heart because I just love my top 4 so much. My top 4
Yeah.
are all movies that I just adore. So, uh, James, what do you think about Rise?
So Rise was definitely really, really good. I will kind of piggyback on what you were saying, Chad. You said this kind of introduced you to the Planet of the Apes franchise, and you said you thought it was going to be stupid. I'd seen the original and then some of the sequels before this one came out because it was in the whole vein. I was in the mindset of like, oh God, they're trying Planet of the Apes again. This is going to be stupid. So like it was kind of the same like kind of thought process like that you and I had, but I ended up liking this just as much thing as you did too. It was actually a really really interesting like beginning to this. You do get some bits like yes, someone said earlier, like the first word he ever says is no, like whole
Hmm.
concept from the
Amazing moment. I
yeah,
love that
it's
moment
like you
so
don't
much.
say that like the people don't say it to that things like that. So the first word is no, and then if you catch one of the scenes. I can't remember which one, but I believe there's a scene when they're in house and one of them reading the newspaper and it talks about a spaceship launch. You can
Oh,
see on the
Oh,
open
yes.
flap. So I wonder
You're right.
maybe if they're, I think too many years may have passed, but they were in that ship for a long time. They crashed down in the OG one. So maybe if they reference it, maybe it's just a little Easter egg, maybe, oh, they came down in the ship in the OG, so we're going to talk about the ship being launched up in the original. So I don't know if it's the same mission or not. It's one of those things I kind of caught where I'm like, man, they're kind of paying attention here, and you see it in the sequels, following movies. Also, I do agree, like a lot what you said about James Franco. Like his character himself does display a lot of like empathy and like things like that. Like he does have a really good heart in this, but is anyone else here like do any of you think that maybe his acting itself is just maybe a little bit too like flat, like a little monotonous? Like some of like
I'm with
his
you. I'll
facial
talk about that too.
expressions, yeah, some of his like facial expressions are just so like linear. I think you get the last moment when Caesar, like Caesar is home, like that thing. Like there's a bit of like kind of pop in his eyes, but like I felt like there's probably like a little bit more like holy shit moment could have got out of that. Maybe not explicitly that, but like me, like when he's like kind of yelling for Caesar, like when he's on the bridge, like get him to come back, things like that. Like it's just a little bit too flat for me. I think as much as I like the character itself, don't know how much I like James Franco in this actually. That was one of the things too, and I know it was all stop motion. We get some. I mean, Andy Serkis is freaking awesome again as always, but I do think I caught a bit of kind of cheaper like CGI in this. I think for 2011, it's a little unexcusable. But when I was watching this versus like the later ones, and even some of the or the OG series, like there is a bit of inexcusable kind of cheaper CGI in this. Overall, this was a great movie. I was very surprised at how much I liked this, and it's certainly interested for the sequels. But it's number 4 on my list.
let me add two comment on 2 things you said, and then I'll let Charles go
Yeah.
Sure.
on everything. The Yeah, I mean it's 2011. I feel like it's one of those things to where they're still trying to figure it out, and then like when Matt Reeves took over, that's when it
Hmm.
gets
Yeah.
perfect. So I mean, you're right. It's not a perfect movie. There are some little jumbles and effects don't hold up. I mean, if you go back to Lord of the Rings Fellowship, like there's that one big creature in the mines of Moria or whatever. Like
Yeah.
that one
Cathedral.
Yeah.
sometimes looks a little bad. And there's a
Oh,
lot
the
of stuff in,
cathedral.
but I guess this is a decade later. But I'm
Yeah.
just saying,
Yeah.
like, you can have like a phenomenal movie that has like not the best overall things as well. So I mean, you're not wrong. But then with James Franco, it probably comes down to taste, I think, because I'm a big James Franco fan. As far as certain roles, like I like him in this a lot. I like him in the Raimi Spider-Man films, and I like him in the Disaster Artist. So those are like a few of the ones that show me that he's not like a bad actor, but he's not like Daniel Day-Lewis or anything like that. He's not, or let's say he's not Gary Oldman and Dawn. So it's
Mhm.
if you're comparing him to that, then yeah, I can see exactly what you're talking about.
Mhm.
But I think he's fine for that specific role personally. Charles, what do you think about this movie?
Yeah, I think I guess I'll start with the things that I didn't enjoy as much, even though I have it really high, and it's not much that I didn't enjoy in this movie. I actually, I the first time I saw it, I connected the most with your viewpoint on James Franco's performance, Chad. I came away being like, I love his performance. I thought it was really understated and empathetic. But rewatching it recently, I felt more similar to what what you felt. There was a lot of moments when I felt like there was a lot more opportunity for him to show more emotion or um, passion in his line delivery. Like some chaotic, incredibly like traumatic things are happening all around him, basically the entire movie. But the biggest emotion I could register from him was just like apathetic depression or just like dejection. It felt like at points, which I can understand that too. But I also like you, Chad. I'm a big fan of him in a ton of movies. I This might be a slight hot take, but I think he was miscast, and I think if I could do everything over again in the movie, I would actually switch his role with David Oyelowo's role.
Mhm.
I'm mispronouncing his last name. I think that's
Hmm.
an interesting performance because David, I feel like, is also miscast in his role. He tries his best to be the kind of corporate guy that's chasing the money and profits, and I get it. He does it well, but I think he would have been able to add a lot more heart and passion if he was in James Franco's role. And meanwhile, James Franco, I think, would have been able to add would have been able to add a more layered performance because he's really good with characters that on a surface level you would be kind of disgusted by, but like kind of lets you see his layers over time. I think James Franco would have been really good in that role. um, but that's the only honestly negative thing I felt about this movie rewatching it. There's a world where it's in my top three. There's a world where it could even be my number one. Like you said, the no scene is, I think, um, might be the best scene in the whole series. Like it just every single time the build up to that scene, the abuse you see Caesar go through, and then his no, and that's what I was talking about earlier. Is that like that's why sound mixing is important. They remove all of the sound after that moment, and it just lets the sound of no echo through the ape sanctuary and through the theater. And I don't know if I guess Chad, you didn't see this in theaters, but James, you might have. When I
Mhm.
saw this in theaters,
Mhm.
like people gasped
No,
in the
yeah,
theaters after
yeah.
this. It was like I guess the best comparison I can come to is like at the end of close to the end of Interstellar when they're like, "There's no time for caution. We got aboard," and everybody was just like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god!" It was kind of like that movie. It's just a great movie moment.
Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely.
Draco Malfoy is I'm sorry I keep calling him that, but he's just like he's so good in this movie.
Tom Felton.
Tom
Yeah,
Felton, he
Yeah.
has a
yeah.
thankless role. Thankless role. More thankless than Draco because at least Draco has some kind of redemption, but he's so good in this movie. It's tough to make you like hate him sometimes, but like he's so good in this movie. It's
Let
actually kind of surprising.
let me throw in because I actually listened to his audiobook, his autobiography that he wrote. And he
Oh, Tom
basically said,
Felton's?
yeah, he basically said that he was trying to get into like the Hollywood, try to make it after Harry Potter and
Yeah.
stuff. And they called him to be in the movie, and he didn't know why, but He was in it. So it's like they must have saw something. I don't know. There's like,
he
you're Draco. You're going to be an asshole in this, I guess.
he was great though. It's just like this is what I mean by like really great actors can take a role like this and make it more. And Tom Felton, when I rewatched it recently, you can really see a lot of like fragility in his performance and a lot of vulnerability. Like he at times like feels ashamed of what he's doing. You see it in his eyes a lot of moments. You
Mhm.
see him second guessing, but like something in him that we don't really learn about to be honest, but something in him you can tell just from his performance is there's a reason why he's treating these other people, these apes, like he does. And it doesn't become any more clear than when he brings like a date over with like they bring two women over into the which Tom Felton, what are you doing? Come on. Like you don't do that. Don't bring your date to your job. You can see a lot more of his layers there with how like kind of embarrassed he is and how he can't quite interact with them well. Um, well, okay. I've talked so much about Draco and everything else. There's
Yeah.
so much to love about this movie. But I think the last two things I want to say about this, or last three things, is the Bright Eyes reference is really great. I love that they call Caesar's mom Bright Eyes. Just such a wonderful little touch. There's so many great nods to the original, and I love that. Um, I think the biggest strength of this movie is that it takes the original material about equality, racism, and it elevates it completely because it adds another layer to it. It adds empathy. I think there is something to be said about the fact that the originals had apes in basically that look like humans. To be honest, like the costumes are nice for the time, but they're apes that are walking around like humans, talking like humans. In this movie, the apes, yes, some of them talk, but they act like apes. And it's incredible that they still work so hard and that we're still able to so easily empathize with Caesar and all of the apes because they look like apes, they act like apes, they are a completely different
Yeah.
culture. And that makes it more fascinating because as you watch the movies, you learn more about this culture. You start to care deeply about the ape community and the ape families, and I can't quite say the same for the originals, that there's ever really a moment where I care deeply about the ape side, except for Zero and Cornelius. But again, they look like humans in an ape costume. So it's harder to pull off. And so I think that's its biggest achievement, that they lean into the apes. Um, I think the last thing is just the climax of this movie is really incredible. I didn't think I was going to get excited as I did, but I
The bridge fight.
immediately, yeah, the bridge is
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
seeing Caesar like have like a backup plan for everything. And then like, even though some of the apes die, like you're just like, I knew what was going to happen, but I just, when the, what's his name jumped off on the helicopter, I was just like, no.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the
um,
big gorilla.
yeah. And he
Oh,
sacrifices himself.
so yeah.
There's just there's so many great moments in that sequence, and I would be kind of doing a disservice to not mention also the Koba foreshadowing in this movie is really
Mhm.
great. And I didn't pick up on it until I rewatched it this time because I think the first time we watch it there is a cue, the Koba musical cue plays, and like briefly
Mm.
when he comes out of the tank, and I'm like
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember it from Dawn, but it's like bomb ba da dun da da da. Like I can't remember what the little ring they give him. And it was great to see all of that foreshadowing for Koba, like his experimentation, James Franco entering the room and being like, "This is wrong, shut it down," like him trying to prevent eventually what Koba becomes. So I really enjoyed that too. So yeah, I mean, we've already talked a lot about this movie. It's incredible. But yeah, I just had it as number four.
Naturally, we're gonna get just way into in-depth conversations with the ones we just love
Yeah.
because there's so much you just want to talk about, and you always end the review show or the ranking show, and then you go, "Shit, I didn't even talk about this one part that I love." It's always
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
All right, so we just did our four, so we're moving on to threes. My three is the original Planet of the Apes. That was Charles's
Nice.
six. James, what is your three?
I had War at number 3.
Four is number three. All right. Um, and Charles, your number three was Escape.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So now we'll move on to twos. Um, James, what is your two?
I had the original Planet of the Apes.
Okay. So we can go ahead and talk about that. James or Charles, just let me know what is your two.
My two is War for the Planet of the Apes.
Okay, and my two is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Um, okay. So we got that. Eh, Sorry for the dead air. All right, so let's talk about the original Planet of the Apes. Um, Charles, you want to start with this one?
Sure. It's gonna sound really awful, like I've committed a cardinal sin placing it so low, and it's not because I think it's a bad movie. I think it's a really, really incredible movie, and I'm thankful for it, honestly. I think for me, it could be just because I've seen it so many times, but for me, this was one of the movies I enjoyed the least rewatching. Um, and there's kind of complicated, I guess, reasons for it. I think the first thing that kind of made it difficult for me to get into it more was the beginning. I always forget how slow the beginning is. I think the apes don't appear until like the 30-minute mark. And like I like slow movies. Like I love Alien. The alien doesn't show up until like 45 minutes into that movie either. But for me, like I feel like in terms of substance, we don't get a lot in the beginning of this movie. We mostly get scenes of Taylor kind of being an asshole to his like other astronauts and also kind of an asshole to the other astronaut that died in the crash. It's like it's dialogue that probably sounded like Clint Eastwoody back when it came out, but like now it just doesn't age as well. Like him him like commenting on like the female astronauts like physical physique even though
Yep.
she's dead.
Yeah.
It's just like weird. It's so weird. And sometimes the way he treats his other astronauts is also a little awkward. And I remember not feeling like he was an asshole when I first started watching it, but this time I was just like, man, Taylor is awful to these other people in the beginning of this movie. But I think the good thing about that is he talks so much and he's so cocky that it makes his imprisonment more impactful. So that could have been the purpose behind it. I think the highlight for me in this movie are the tribunal scenes. I think the middle of the movie is probably its strongest. Seeing Taylor learn more about this ape culture, seeing Zira and Cornelius advocate for him, seeing the conversations and debates with Dr. Gaius, um, that stuff is really, really, really incredible stuff. And I think it feels like a classic Twilight Zone episode, which makes sense because I think Rod Sterling was involved with this movie as well. Um, I think though for me, the reason why I had trouble enjoying it is because I forgot how little plot really happens. This might be doing a disservice to it, but if I had to describe the plot in like three ways, I would say Taylor crash lands, he finds apes, um, he escapes from apes, and he finds out he's on Earth. That sounds like a lot happens, but in reality, not really a lot happens. They briefly see like a kind of an area that has been excavated in the Forbidden Zone. They learn that humans have been around. Then he sees the Statue of Liberty at the end. There's not really a battle. There's not really a big confrontation at the end of the movie either. There's not really a final struggle. It just kind of ends with a really ominous and terrifying image. The Statue of Liberty is an incredibly strong ending, and but I also feel like if it didn't have that ending, I think it would have gone out with a very like bad whimper. Like the ending of the movie would have been a lot more weak without that kind of Statue of Liberty image. Um, I think the last thing I want to say about this is that I'm talking a lot about the negatives, but it's important to state that like we wouldn't have anything that we watched the new trilogy without this movie. And I that's why I still enjoy it, even though I put it at 6. There's so many great moments in this movie where you can see it turn into something great later. But I had a lot of difficulty enjoying it genuinely this time around.
Yeah, and very well said, Charles. And I think that's what it comes down to a lot of the times is enjoyment. Like people rank things based on their enjoyment a lot of the
Yeah.
times. Like you want to go and watch a movie and review it and go, okay, this movie objectively is a perfect movie because of this. And it's like, well, sure. Okay, you can talk about like over here why a film is constructed in such a way that it's, it just does everything right.
Hmm.
But if you're not enjoying it, there's value in the enjoyment. So if you're not enjoying it, I could see you taking a peg away from it and saying, no, what, I'm going to rank this a little lower. Um, for me, yeah, I mean it's a bit of a slow burn, but I don't mind it. I think it's because like this one is like just like you said, it's the OG, it's the original, it's the
Yeah.
one that started it all. It's I think kind of a perfect little uh interesting like science fiction movie from the late 60s that didn't have to spawn a franchise, but it did.
Yeah.
And it's
You're
cool
right.
that it did, but I feel like if we just had that movie, it would just be a great movie from the late 1960s that's kind of iconic.
It would have been
And it's
like a
a
long Twilight Zone episode almost in a way if it had been
Yeah,
like that.
actually,
Yeah,
you're
true.
not wrong on that. It has like its little gimmick, that what if the apes took over and
Hmm.
humans were mostly mute, and you don't know about the weird mutants yet, but the humans are mostly mute. And what if they crash landed on there and from the past, I guess, and then found out that they're actually on Earth just in the future. Um, which like you were talking about, like if that ending hadn't been there, with the Statue of Liberty, would it have been as strong of a movie? Probably not. But since it is in there, I'm
Yeah.
like, no, it is a really good ending, and it's one of those where you know I don't know, like, how much it like tracks with the rest of the movie, but like, sometimes endings in movies are there just to have like a shocking like revelation that the characters didn't know, that you also find out along with the characters, and you're like, "Oh my god." Like, "Whoa." Like when you
Hmm.
first realize that, like especially back then when you first realized that, if you hadn't had that spoiled for you, is probably like a really cool moment, almost like I won't spoil it now, but like the Sixth Sense reveal, or any other like Shyamalan twists that come up that you're like, whoa, feel like this is something that could have inspired Shyamalan to do his twist. But
Yeah.
no, Charles, I mean, you're actually like right. This doesn't have like a battle. There's no big set pieces or anything like that. It's mostly just like the philosophy and science and religion. And I feel like that's what kind of makes this super interesting, because it like really reflects our human society now, is where we have science versus religion all of the time. And it's almost like, what, why can't you have both? But you have people who will use religion to set people back, or try to create a false reality for this
Hmm.
bubble for people to live in, to say this is how we came to be. This is our we worship this god, and everything else. No, if you find out evidence to the contrary, that someone planted that's false. It's like, well, this human doll talks. Humans don't talk. And I love stuff like that. Like that's kind of the big confrontation, is them confronting this old motherfucker who just won't who just is
Yeah.
trying to deceive
Dr.
an
Zayas.
entire people. um and I just love like that whole bit, like his trying to cover things up, like the message in the sand, he like kicks and sand to cover it up, and stuff like that. So it's just a lot of little stuff. It's a slow burn.
Hmm.
It's a late 60s sci-fi movie, and I feel like a lot of those were kind of like this, where they're not big and extravagant like a Ben-Hur, or like something like a big action set piece from around that time. But it is a really good kind of masterpiece, um, slow burn
Yeah.
science fiction film that just spawned an entire franchise. So that's why I put it at 3. I was like, I know I'm gonna put all of the movies in the new trilogy 1, 2, and 3, just in what order. But then I was like, you know what? I gotta put the OG higher, and the only one that I would even think of putting it higher than would be Rise. But even still, my top 4 are just all fantastic, in my opinion. James, what do you think about the OG?
Yeah, the first one I liked through and through. I think I'm one of those types who likes a good slow burn film, so like the lack of like huge, massive, epic battle like doesn't really ruin it for me as it can in some other movies. Like sometimes you just get that kind of typical huge explosion, the ending, and it's might not be the same pace or like the same type of like style for whatever that movie may be. I liked most parts of this. I do kind of like the tension you get when he gets his Taylor gets his like throat injured in that first hunt, and they're like, "Oh, see, all these humans can't talk." And you're like, "No, that one can. He can." Like, and then you finally hit him with the "Get your
Yeah.
stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape."
Oh,
Such a great
that's
line.
that's that's like right up there with the no in Rise.
Right?
Like,
Yeah, yeah. It's like such a great opening line for that, and you get the classic like you. Damn, did it like damn you all to hell like at the end, which
Yeah.
I agree with you, Charles. If they like cut that movie to the credits without that Statue of Liberty reveal, it would not be the same movie. I don't think
yeah,
it would because the last ape is like, oh, he's off to his destiny. If they cut the credits right there, it probably wouldn't be the same movie. No, but I
Yeah.
like all like the kind of like moral and philosophical things they get into. I liked a little bit when they're like, "Oh, flight! How? What do you mean you flew here? Flight's impossible!" And he makes a little paper airplane, and just chucks it across the room. Like I like that. I'm pretty sure that was
That's
the
a great
OG one.
moment.
Yeah, that's a great moment in that one. I like just a lot about this, and I had to put this in my top 4, sure. Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. I wanted to, and I'm glad, Chad, you brought up the religion versus science. That's an underappreciated part of these movies too. Those debates are great. What did you, I kind of talked about this a little bit in Beneath, but what did you think of the treatment of Nova as a character in the first 2 movies? Because that's been something that like I found kind of affecting me in a negative way a lot more when I rewatched it
Yeah.
too.
I mean, I think like ultimately Nova is I mean, I think she's isn't she just kind of mostly used as like a plot device? She's not like
Yeah.
really given that much of a character. So
Yeah,
if
she's
you
not.
were to find like a flaw of those 2 movies, I would say that, but I feel like that it's probably just like I mean, I don't know. I feel like they do similar they have similar issues with movies sometimes today. But
Yeah.
like back then, I feel like they're more likely to underwrite like female characters and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
But it doesn't like crazy bother me,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because the rest of the movie is just so strong. But
Yeah.
you're
That
always
makes
going to
sense.
have side characters. I guess she's not really a side character though, so I can understand why it bothers you.
Yeah, I,
So
I think it didn't click for me really until I saw Beneath like right after, and I was just like, man, Nova is in both of these movies for a long amount of time, more time probably than Taylor himself, maybe, or at least close to it. And she's
yeah,
just like given nothing to do. She's just continually told what to do or like controlled by other people. It's just it gets kind of
yeah.
nauseating for me to watch. But yeah,
I
it's luckily there's so many other great things in the movie.
Yeah, I feel like there's like not much more to give her in the original. So I would say that I would probably fault Beneath a little bit more. Like if you're going to continue with her character, like maybe they
Yeah,
could have did use that movie to develop her a little bit more and they just didn't. So
yeah,
all right. So we talked about the OG. Now we're in our top 2. And yeah, I think we've already said everything because I have everything already calculated here. But let's just go through it again. My number 2 is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. James, what was your 2?
My 2 was the original one.
That's right. And Charles, yours was War.
yep.
Okay. And then let's just do our number 1s. James, what's your number 1?
Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Charles.
Dawn.
And mine is War for the Planet of the Apes. So yeah, so we mostly had Dawn and War in our top two,
Hmm.
pretty much. I do feel like they are the strongest um, of the entire slate. These two. Matt Reeves knows how to make a damn Planet of the Apes movie. So all
Yeah,
right. Who Charles, why don't you start with Dawn? Wait, no,
sure,
War,
sure,
because
yeah.
Dawn
Mhm.
is most highly ranked.
Yeah, I think War's just an amazing movie. I think the first thing that really stood out to me was in the very beginning of the movie. I love how, especially Dawn in this movie, is a big champion of show don't tell. And I just love the moment when you see the soldiers sneaking through the jungle or the forest, and then you just see a ape behind them, and you think like it's going to attack, but no, the ape is just helping them, like
Yeah.
knocking on the shoulder and pointing. What a great moment of world building, but just doing it without any dialogue, just showing you like that's all you need to know. Okay, there are some apes that are helping them. Kind of makes sense. There were some divisions between the apes in the last movie. um, I think the only, well, no, this isn't a negative. This is a good thing, but it's hard for me to watch. I guess it's similar to your Escape point. This is a hard movie to watch at some
Yes.
points, whereas Escape was a hard for me movie for you to watch. This was a hard movie for me to watch. I think the moment when he loses basically most of his family is just gut wrenching.
Yeah.
Just you, especially after seeing how much Cornelius goes through in Dawn, and the growth that his son goes through in that movie, and then seeing Caesar lose Cornelius and Lake
Blue
all at
Eyes.
once, or his
I
Blue
think his name
Eyes.
is Blue Eyes in the
Oh, I
new
thought it was
trilogy.
Cornelius, but yeah, Blue Eyes.
Mhm.
Yeah, seeing him lose them in one go and seeing Woody like Harrelson just kind of go, great introduction to a villain,
Mm.
really makes you
Yeah.
hate him right away. But it is just, it's hard to watch even like later in the movies in the when he's imprisoned and he's being starved and beaten. It's just, it's tough to watch at times. There's not a lot of brightness in the movie. And so that's the only one of the only things that kind of marked it for me, just because it's just not as enjoyable to watch. But I think the strengths ultimately way outweigh the like kind of hard to watch. Nova is finally, I feel like, redeemed in this movie. I feel like even though Nova's a kid in this movie, and this
Mm.
also like shows how thinly written Nova was written in the first two movies. Nova as a child is so much more of a character and has more agency than Nova as a grown ass woman in the first two movies. And it's because of the writing is great and the acting of Nova. I don't know who the actor is. She's great. She turns what could have easily been like a moment where the movie slows down and it's just like, oh, we got to take care of a kid now, and it makes a kid like a really important bridge building connection for Caesar, a way for him to get in touch with his human roots again. Um, I
I will say
think
that the name of the actress is Amaya Miller.
Maya Miller. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I think the scene in particular when she's feeding the apes in the jail and giving them water is just a beautiful moment. Um, I think the ending is perfect as well in this movie. It just kills me every single time that like Caesar does everything he can, makes all of the sacrifices, tries to build a community with humans even at times, and he gets his ape family, his ape community to a safe haven. It seems like a beautiful home, but he can't live to really see them enjoy it. He can't live to see himself enjoy it. And it's such a tragic ending. Seeing him talk with Maurice and then eventually fall to the side and pass away is just heartbreaking. But I think it's an important ending, and I can't think of a better ending for Caesar, because Caesar, both in history in a way, but also as a character in the Apes movie, he was always, and I'll talk about this more in Dawn, he was always going to be a leader that was going to create a better world, but not live long enough to be able to live in it. He's a protest leader in a lot of ways, like great leaders in history that fight for this change and aren't killed ultimately before they can even see this change come around. Um, and so I think it's a powerful ending. I think the Woody Harrelson is incredible in this movie as well. There's so many strengths. I think the only thing that I think really docked it points for me was it does feel like kind of a mishmash of a movie, which I don't think is necessarily a negative, but it can sometimes be hard to grapple with, especially with how it was marketed. I think the title's kind of a little bit wrong for the movie. I would probably switch the titles of Dawn and War. I think it might work a little bit better. But just because this movie, you started thinking there's going to be a war movie, but then it kind of quickly becomes into a road trip movie for about a half hour to 45 minutes. And then it becomes a jailbreak movie at the end. So it's kind of like three movies in one, three structures in one. And for me, sometimes it can be a little bit hard for me to grasp onto. Whereas Dawn, the structure of that is pretty solid and contained all throughout. So I think that was the only reason I didn't like it as much as Dawn, is just because I felt like I was getting three movies in one, but I almost wanted to spend more time on the war part, or more time on the road trip part, or more time on the prison break part. But instead, we kind of touch on all three.
I mean, interesting points. I'll say this one is my favorite, but it's just my favorite by a hair because I also adore Dawn so much. These two movies are just so freaking perfect,
Yeah.
and Rise is like right behind them. So honestly, I think this is just like as perfect of a trilogy as you could get. I would put it right up there with like Lord of the Rings and How to Train Your Dragon and Toy
Hmm.
Story and all these fantastic trilogies, and I'm excited for the new one to come out. But yeah, I just think it all works so well, and I think this is a great capper. My only pushback a little bit to like the titling of it, where I understand where you're coming from. I would argue that like maybe it's a little bit of a um, what do you call it, a semantics about like what you consider to be like a war movie, because I know that your favorite war movie and one of your favorite movies of all time is The Thin Red Line,
Hmm.
and it's during a war, but there's not like a ton of battle stuff going on all the time.
Yeah.
There's people going and talking to like the people that live there, like the natives of that land, and stuff like that, and swimming and stuff like that. So, but it's still a war movie, and that
Hmm.
is what I would say about this one too, is that the war still persists, even if it's not all like Caesar, with two like machine guns or whatever
Like
blasting
Koba.
away, or yeah, Koba, exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chad. Yeah.
So I would say that the war is the thing in the background that persists, and it's them trying to confront the guy and try to see if they can like put a stop to the madness. And yeah, you get the prison break is also kind of part of the war, because that's during World War II. It kind of takes on kind of a like a Nazi style
Mm, yeah.
thing, and it really does, and it's that dark. Like I agree with you. I think the reason why I am able to be okay more with that versus Escape is because I don't think there's like a tonal shift. I think it's that dark from the beginning to the end.
That's a great point.
Yet
Yeah.
there still persists little moments of levity that keep it from being completely dark to where you can't even enjoy it. When they introduced Bad Ape with Steve Zahn, one of
Oh,
my
yeah.
favorite characters of all time, because he's so funny, and his like misunderstanding, his like that's mine, kind of a
Yeah.
deal. And he's just another ape that can actually talk and talk very well, and he comes from a zoo. And the more you learn about him, you see that he also has experienced a lot of tragedy. So
Hmm.
he's also a very rich character. He's not just comic relief for the sake of it, but he is funny. And I think that adds a lot of, levity. There's also a lot of like really great bittersweet moments that are kind of light but then sad, like when the connection between the one gorilla and Nova, and then you get that build relationship building, and then the gorilla dies, and then she puts the flower in his hair, and it's just like beautiful
Hmm.
moments like that. I think this is like a really great third installment in this franchise, and just trying to think about everything else that's just so fantastic about it. But I think you actually like hit the nail on the head there, Charles, when you just talk about how it's like there's barely dialogue in this movie. Like
Yeah.
all the dialogue that happens is just enough to, give you information that you can't get out elsewise otherwise. And then everything else is just purely through action and reaction and all this stuff. And yeah, the very beginning when his family's gunned down, just I love hate that scene because like you said, it's so hard to watch because it's such a devastating moment, but I also love it because I love like the acting that Andy Serkis gives, just like the pure just like what is like shock and just like what is happening right now, and then cut to like pure anger, and then you get some action from Caesar. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I just love the whole stuff about like the humans going mute, and how Woody Harrelson's character would rather kill them than try to like learn and stop what's going on. He would rather kill them and try to save himself, and the selfishness of that. And whereas the apes would take one of them under their wing, even though Caesar didn't want to at first. You need that Maurice to help
Maurice,
that go
let's
on.
go.
But yeah, I could go on. We could probably sit here for another 2 hours analyzing just this trilogy because it's so freaking amazing. But yeah, this one is beautiful to look at. It's the most realized I think these apes have ever been.
Mhm.
I'm interested to see how fantastic they're going to look in Kingdom, because in this it's just like them riding the horses, just a beautiful landscape shots, just like art, and just it's a masterpiece in my opinion.
Mhm.
I know most people rank Dawn number one, and on another day Dawn might be my number one, but today and a lot of days it has been War, because I just think it's a masterpiece. James, what do you think
Yeah.
about War for the Planet of the Apes?
I absolutely love War for Planet of the Apes. It's such a great movie. That intro is one of the best intros I've seen in quite a long time for a movie. I love their sneaking through the forest. Like Charles said, you got the gorilla paw come up, and it turns out he's helped. Like they have, there's still loyal to Koba throughout the whole. That puts a pretty interesting twist on it. I mean, the action scenes are great. Of course, they're just so well choreographed. They're just so well, the effects are just so good. I love at the end how when Nova is, helping feed the apes, and Caesar drops her doll in the camp, and then Woody Harrelson picks it up, and I'm like, we all know how well, we're all pretty familiar with contact, virus in this day and
Yeah.
age. So that's how it just continues. And it's in the first one, like the pilot is sick and he goes to the airport, kind of got a bloody nose, sneezing up a bit. That's how all that starts off. So you get kind of that continuation of this like final spread of this virus. But it's so interesting to see them killing off people who just can't speak anymore, who just like grunt and cough and things like that. I do love the introduction to Nova. I thought that was done really, really well. It kind of ruins some of the like emotions in it for me a little bit, just having like seen the like original movies, like when he calls him Cornelius. Like, unfortunately, a part of me is like, okay, Cornelius, awesome. He's such a huge part of the originals. He's surviving. Like, it kind of takes that a little bit for me, but I do understand like how emotional some of the scenes get, and they do it so well. I love Woody Harrelson, the group Alpha Omega. Like I said earlier, that emblem was on that nuke in the Planet and the Apes sequel, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. That's their group name, so like that shows you they're paying attention. I think one little nitpicky part about this movie, and this is just kind of me being me, we get this in some of our rankings. The prison escape, I'm sorry, but there's no way an entire prison camp of chimps goes missing overnight like that, and no one knows what the hell happens. Like the camera pans
Yeah,
on them, like crawling across the power cords or whatever over the gates, and you can see the guards like walking, like they're not looking up or anything. But it's like, I'm sorry, guys, come on, that's
yeah,
that's a bit much for me to be honest. So that was my one kind of like nitpicky thing, but it's excusable. The movie's just fantastic overall. I love like their chant, blood makes the grass grow, we make the blood flow. Like he at the same time he kind of like tests his like men when he gives them that chant because he wants to make sure they can all still talk. There's no coughers and sneezers in the group or anything like that. So that's a
yeah.
pretty interesting
Good
way to kind
point.
of weed them out too with that chant. But that was pretty badass. Like the movie itself was just great, but I mean, Dawn is my number one. I just like that one more, but this is a great movie overall, though. I do love War.
You know,
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like,
yeah,
just like I forgot to mention and wore the all of the when Caesar sees like Koba's face and stuff,
Yeah,
and just gets that
oh yeah,
constant
yeah.
reminder of what he could become if he lets that anger consume him.
hmm,
So I love that he's able to keep that what he learned from Dawn and keep that so he doesn't go to the dark side.
yeah. I you know, while you were talking about how the disease spread, it made me realize that might be another nod to the original, where like at the original they find the human doll, and in this one the
Yeah.
human doll
Yeah,
spreads the
true. Yeah,
virus. It's just
true.
it's
I
another
was
it's
thinking of the same thing. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
yeah,
good
it's
point,
just like
Charles.
yeah.
it's another reason that like though the new trilogy is just so good that it just you can tell like they treated the original movies as like a text to like
Of
hmm
go back
course,
and
yeah.
revisit and improve on. And I think that's what reboots, if reboots are going to happen, I think that's what they should do is take what worked in the original and trying to elevate it in some way. And that certainly does it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll go ahead and start with Dawn. And then you guys can wrap it up after that because we are at the end. We're talking about our last film. Yeah, no, I understand why people rank Dawn number one. And honestly, it's kind of like 1A, 1B situation with Dawn and
Yeah.
War, just because I love me a Matt Reeves film just in general. Like, I don't think that dude has missed. And honestly, I'd love to talk about these again and do a Matt Reeves ranking at some point because that dude just makes crazy good movies. I
Hmm.
don't think he can really miss. But yeah, Dawn is phenomenal. I love how they've established their. I mean, obviously, right off the bat, just looks so much better than Rise as far as like the actual ape, like computer graphics parts of the apes. They just look so real in this, and like especially like when they put on like the makeup and like you've seen the poster for the movie where he's got like the white paint on his face and stuff. It just looks so good. Um, but yeah, I love how they've established the society, and then you have the humans come in, and then you see that most of humanity has died out that we know of. But then you have this like little faction, this caravan that has posted up, and they need to go access the power, and they got to go through the apes to get there. But of course, the apes are not going to be very friendly to that, and I think a lot of those dynamics really play into it, especially when you do have Koba from the first one, who was treated absolutely terribly,
Yeah.
and then you get to see the dynamic between Koba and Caesar, and how Koba does the thing to Caesar the whole time, but then he starts to realize that Caesar's not going to get him to where he wants to basically kill the humans, so that they're no longer a threat and they can't hurt any of them. But he doesn't think that Caesar is a strong leader, but he doesn't realize that Caesar's intelligence and willingness to forgive makes him a better leader,
Yep.
because Koba is just going to go with the raw like id emotion of attacking something that he fears, and even though these are not the same humans that hurt him, that's all he can see is their skin. and that they're different. But yeah, I love that whole dynamic with them. And I'll just say too that like when I was rewatching the sequels to the original movie, while Roddy McDowall I think is great in his role, there are certain times that I'm sitting there like, why is this lanky ape the one that everybody follows just because he can
Yeah,
monologue really well?
especially in battle, it stands
Yeah,
out. Yeah.
exactly. I'm like, why? And then like when I look at Dawn and War, I can totally see why Caesar
Hmm.
is the leader. And even in Rise, you see how he starts his leadership and he proves time and time again, especially when confronted with Koba. It's kind of like a whole Black Panther thing where they have to battle for the kingship and stuff like that. And I feel like here, it's basically the same thing. Is that Caesar is challenged, he falls, and then he comes back, to basically say, Koba, you're wrong. And, yeah, ape doesn't kill ape, but Koba, you are no ape. And then, you know what happens to Koba. But which I think is still sad because, you know, you know why Koba is the way that he is, and it's not
Yeah.
his fault. But at the end of the day, he's still doing wrong. He's a liability, and he's going to get apes killed. He's going to get humans killed. And you can see like the society that he forges, locking up all the other apes in cages and trying to kill Caesar and stuff like that. So it's just really a phenomenal movie about like, society and, you know, uh, yeah, sociology and, morals in general. And it looks phenomenal. Yeah, this one is also pretty much a perfect movie. I adore it. Gary Oldman,
Yeah.
phenomenal. So James, why do you love Dawn of the Planet of the Apes?
This one just surprised me the most out of all the Planet of the Apes viewings, especially with like kind of a renewed interest in it after Rise. Like coming out of the theater the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my god, that was probably like one of the greatest movies I think I've ever seen. I love like the bits of conflict and how that's handled. I mean, you do get kind of stereotypical. There's that one like asshole character who like he sneaks the gun into the camp and he's just that general is kind of negative guy. But I like all of it. I like how they, kind of try to work with the apes to get like the electricity to work again. I do like the bit at the end, like you were saying, the conflict between Caesar and Koba, where it's like, Koba fights for Koba, like that really kind of
Yeah,
puts it into like kind of really sums everything up about like why he just wants plain revenge the
Yeah.
ape on the humans, which he goes into also when he's talking. I think his son in one of the scenes, he's like Koba's only seen the bad. He's like a
Hmm.
tortured past, that kind of thing. So he doesn't really know much else. I kind of like the bit when they first bring them in the camps, and he says like no guns. Like that could be kind of a callback to like we were talking about when they destroy the guns. One of the sequel, or I'm sorry, the original series, like they're
Yeah.
bashing rocks or bashing the guns apart with the rocks, which only lasts so long in Koba's army. The first thing he does is give them all guns, but I love conflict between them two. I think it was done so well. The storytelling is just so great. You get a no name, like, well, I wouldn't say no name actors, but like with the apes being the central part of this, like you forget. It's like I forget Gary Oldman is in almost all the time. I'm like, oh right, Gary Oldman. Like Kerry Russell's in it. Cody Smith McPhee plays the kid. Jason Clark plays. I forget his name, but he
Isaac
has a
Clarke or Jason?
Jason
I
Clarke.
Jason
Yeah,
Clark.
Jason Clarke.
Yeah, Jason Clark, and they do such good job with their roles too.
Hmm.
I really just love the performances in this thing. I always talk about rewatchable movies in these rankings, and this is one I will rewatch pretty much anytime. I think this is just the best Planet of the Apes movie, hands down.
did you also mention Toby Cabell?
Oh yeah, Toby Kebbell, that's
Holy
right. Yeah,
shit, dude,
yeah,
it's Koba.
yeah. Does a
Uh,
great
Yeah.
job with Koba for sure,
Charles,
definitely.
Yeah. I'm
what do you
so
think?
glad you. Yeah, I'm so glad you talked about the humans, James, because this is one of my favorite kind of traditions all the apes movies have is there's always a human helper like in all of them. Like it's kind of cool to see. Like it's just kind of a tradition, I guess.
Mhm.
And in this one, if I had to pick my favorite human helpers, it would be this one. They are, when I talk about like heart and passion and why I don't feel it as much from James Franco in Rise, you get so much of it from Jason Isaacs, right? Jason
Clark.
Clark.
Isaacs,
Jason Clark.
Jason Clark in this
Yeah.
movie. He is just incredible in his role. That family with Carrie Russell as well.
Mhm.
It's just beautiful. You get to see, you get to get attached to them. They get to attached with the apes. There's this connection that builds. I love the scene with Maurice getting to read the comic with Cody Smith McPhee. There's so much I love about the movie. Gary Oldman as well, obviously. I think my favorite part about this movie is everybody, my favorite writing is when everybody's motivations make complete sense. And in this movie, everybody's motivation and their actions make complete sense, even though they're tragic and awful at times. For Gary Oldman, like I feel like uncomfortable even calling him a villain. I don't even think he is a villain in this movie.
Yeah.
He's continually being like, if I don't take care of the people, like what are they gonna do? Like I'm trying to take care, and like he's told like just wait like 3 days, and he's just like cool, I'm fine with that. I don't want to fight the apes. Like he is a pragmatic leader that's just trying to do the best he can with what he has. And even the ending when he blows everything up, for all he knows, he has had little to no interaction or understanding of Caesar and Koba. He has no reason to believe that Caesar, another ape that is going to protect everybody after the apes basically just massacred half of their colony. So everything he does makes sense. And I love him in this movie. And I think it's a really hard role to be the humans in the apes movie, especially the new trilogy, because you just love the apes so much. But the humans, I do think hold their own in this. I think the if I had to say what the central movie is about, it feels like a really big battle for Caesar's soul. You really feel like during several moments in this movie that he could go to Koba's side, because there's definitely some moments he questions. He almost goes into that revenge aspect because Caesar also has a lot of reasons to feel to avenge as well. The humans caused him a lot of harm. And Koba, it completely makes sense why he feels the way he feels, because he has had zero positive interactions with humans. Of course, someone that has been treated like that by humans can't treat humans with equality, respect, empathy. And so it makes Koba also a tragic figure. He wants to be a good leader. I do think he wants to lead the apes to a happy place, a happy ending. His route to get there is a lot more violent though than Caesar's. And I think Koba really stands out when you place him next to General Aldo from Battle, which is what his character is probably inspired from.
Mhm.
Like not even close in terms of character development. You could even make the argument that Koba is like the most interesting character in the movie.
Yeah.
It's incredible seeing him in that scene when he is joking with the guys.
Yes.
Is just
The
so
best. Yeah.
good every single time I watch it. It's just incredible stuff.
Because like Toby Kebbell had to do all of that. Like
Yeah.
that's all him doing that with
Mhm.
ape stuff imposed over him.
Yeah, it's
Amazing.
incredible. It's like it's wonderful. I love the closing moments of this movie too. I think oh yeah, the human says Jason Clark says, I thought we had a chance.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then Caesar says, me too. And that's like the closing words, and that's
Yeah.
just so beautiful. And then you see Jason Clark back away into the darkness. We never see the family again, but his
Mhm.
absence is felt in war. It feels tragic. Like war is almost Caesar accepting that humans and apes can't coexist, even though he wants that to happen. Which is why Nova is such a breath of fresh air in that movie, a new
Yeah.
generation of humans. And it's such a beautiful, it almost feels like a Casablanca moment. Like you can see they could have this future. They could have had this community. There's a world where the apes do coexist with the humans. A colony is formed. It was striving that way. But unfortunately, the past came to haunt Koba and the humans, and it just was impossible to do it. Um, gosh, I could talk about this movie countless times, but I think, James, you said it really well when you said this is a rewatchable movie. I can see myself rewatching and coming back to this movie countless times because the journey of all the characters is so wonderful to watch. Even Caesar, as painful as it is to see him shot and fall, I remember when I saw that in the movies, I was just like, whoa, he can't be dead. He can't be dead. But seeing him rise is so satisfying. And I thought it was really insightful, Chad, that you mentioned Black Panther. Now that I think about it, the outline of that movie is very similar to this movie in a lot of ways. But I mean, both are great in their own respect.
And yet we don't get a Dawn of the Planet of the Apes Best Picture nomination.
No, it's
Right?
tragic because this deserves a Best Picture nomination. This is the amount of I guess the last thing I wanted to say about this is the pathos. Like I feel like the pathos is missing from a lot of the original movies, like the emotion. And that's okay. Like I love the scientific discussions and the philosophical discussions. I love that, but the emotions in this movie are so powerful. There are, like Chad, like you mentioned it with War too, but in this movie too, there are like 10 or 15-minute sequences. No dialogue is happening at all. It's just emotions, and it makes the movie really, really impactful every single time I watch it.
Absolutely agree. Like I said, Matt Reeves knows how to make a damn Planet of the Apes movie. So we ranked them all. We discussed them. We have some that we adore, some we like, and then some are just okay. But here is our and then one that's maybe so bad it's good. Here is our official final ranking for You Ranking With Me. At number 8, we have the remake, the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes from 2001. Number 7, we have Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Number 6 is a tie, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes and Battle for the Planet of the Apes. At number 5, we have Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And number 4, we have Rise of the Planet of the Apes. At number 3, we have the OG Planet of the Apes from 1968. Number 2, we have War for the Planet of the Apes. And our number 1 is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Such a fantastic ranking. Thank you guys so much for chatting Planet of the Apes with me today, because these movies, even the sequels to the original, I could see myself like returning to, especially because I know I watched them very differently from like how Charles watched them, and even James, and I could see myself going in with both of your guys' thoughts on these and just noticing more things, and in the older ones, but especially in the newer ones as well. So always love returning to that franchise. So do you guys have any final words on the Planet of the Apes?
I don't think so. We wrapped it up pretty well, I think.
I think for me, I'm just thankful to get like 2 hours to talk about these movies, because these movies do not get talked about enough, honestly. Like it feels like it kind of disappeared with like Marvel Rising. It just kind of, I think that people forget about the new trilogy especially, but it really deserves people to revisit it, because it's so good. So I just enjoyed talking about it.
Yeah, same here. Well, hopefully the new Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes will spawn something else. And then with all the Marvel fatigue that's out there, maybe this will be the new thing that people, until they go back to the MCUs of the worlds. But yeah, like I said, thank you guys again, because it's such a fun franchise to talk about. On the horizon, we have Spider-Man ranking that we're doing, and we have yet Charles won't be on that one, but we have yet to peg a day to record that. But look out for that one, because this will probably drop before that does. And we don't have too much. I know I want to get so we had fun doing our Disney animation ranking. I want to do like a Pixar, DreamWorks. There's a lot. There's some directors we've been talking about doing. I know I want to do like a Wes Anderson. At some point.
That would be a great one.
we've been talking about doing as well. And then I just talked about over on my other show that I do, Picture This, on the Dill Pickle Movie Network. Check that out. I discussed with Dylan, who's on here a lot, doing a Steven Spielberg one.
Oh, wow.
I'm
Yeah.
That'd
down
be a
for
good
that.
one.
Yeah.
That'd be a
Yeah.
monster of a one, but that'd be a good
Yeah.
one.
It would. It's like 34 movies. So
Yeah.
yeah, that would be fun. But yeah, so we have a lot in the working that we're excited about. So keep checking here. If you've watched this far, thank you, and for watching. And just go back and watch a lot of the other rankings. Like I said, we did the big 61 film Disney animated ranking, which is like 5.5 hours. It's crazy. And then, we did Harry Potter. We did some horror franchises. We did Edgar Wright. So, yeah, there's a Quentin Tarantino. There's a lot that we've done that was very, very fun. So check out all those videos. And, shit. Are you ranking with me?
No.
No?